Turn around.
Thanks, JW. I think all would agree that both Taiwan and the Ukraine are flashpoints in the world today that we would like to know a little more about, especially since they say they have their interests linked to nuclear powers that would like to see the reduction in our power and influence in the world. We're lucky today to have our speaker, Jim Reilly, who's a retired Marine colonel and also a member of our club, to present insights on the Taiwan situation that you're not going to get from the media. Here's a short view of his qualifications. He was an active duty Marine for 30 years. Most of his overseas tours were in the Pacific area. He's lived in both Japan, Hawaii, and Mountain Brook, although I don't know why that is in here. He's been operating in, not just studying, the Indo-Asia Pacific Theater since 2004 and has seen the development and the slow evolution of the current strategic situation. He's traveled extensively through China, India, and Taiwan. I might make note here, we're calling it the Indo-Pacific situation now, or area. When I was active, it was just the Pacific area, and the command was known as PACOM. But due to the rising influence of India in that area, it has now been renamed the Indo-Pacific region. He has worked with the defense establishments in 16 countries throughout the region. I know that's true. One time I was trying to get a hold of him, and he was trying to catch a plane in Indonesia. The other time, I think he said it was in Mongolia. So he gets around in that area of the country. He has been a fellow engaging Chinese and Indian academics and military institutions. In 2020, he spent over 200 days in the region. He knows the people, the leaders, the institutions of the key nations in that region and how they feel about China. That's just a short version of his qualifications to talk about the subject. And that includes the relationship between China and Taiwan, U.S. policy toward both U.S. membership in regional alliances and the current situation, to include the use of balloons, not just for birthday parties. Jim has spoken to the club before on China, as well as being a member of the Ukraine panel we had some time back. Join me and welcome him back.
Thank you, Ed. I got to raise this for a little bit taller than you. In fact, this is the fourth time I've spoken before you. The first time Miss Carroll got me up here to talk about ISIS nearly 8 years ago. Don't know why, but I guess I'm a return speaker for whatever reasons. I had to say this up front because it's true. These are all my thoughts. I don't represent U.S. Indo-PACOM. I don't represent the Department of Defense. I don't represent our government. This is me trying to make sense of the chaotic environment that we currently see over in the Indo-Pacific region. That's basically what this is. And I'm trying to capitalize on my experiences, as well as the fact that I am a trained planner in the military, went to a postgraduate school for a year of immersion training in order to try to coalesce all those things from the national strategic level all the way down to the operational level, how everything fits together in order for this nation to move forward in the way it needs to move forward. So really what you're going to see here today is me trying to make sense out of all this mess that we're seeing right now. The first part of understanding something is a gaining awareness. Okay, and through that awareness, we have a greater understanding of what challenges are placed before us. And again, that's the intent here. And dare I say, I'd like to fly at the balloon level, about 60,000 feet, because I think that is where the key discussion needs to be had at the front end of whatever this nation decides to do with regards to Taiwan and the region that we have, that we operate over there regularly on a daily basis. It is my experience that we always have a 50% chance of getting it right. Okay, that's really about the extent of foreign policy. It's an action, it's a reaction, it's a counteraction. How we are able to go ahead and joust with whatever adversary we may have will set us apart. Every answer is not going to be correct at the front end. And one of the things I would like to know, and this is why this is important to me, is I want to know why we are doing things and how we are going to do those things. And what is the intent of that action? Where does it all go to? Why is the big question. I think the why needs to be answered in this nation. Okay. And with that introduction, we will move on. The first slide here is a key takeaway slide. Oh, okay. I had to figure out, why is Taiwan so important? If we had to sell the American public on Taiwan, okay, other than saying it is our responsibility, why is it important? So I came up with two things, all centered around the South China Sea. The PRC strategic imperative, I believe, is to gain control of the South China Sea. Okay, that feeds the purse, that feeds the belly. That provides security because they gain access outside of the first island chain, which I will show you later on in the presentation. That's why it's a strategic imperative. Taiwan in and of itself is a national objective. Okay, that feeds the heart. Okay, from day one, the PRC, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has stated that Taiwan is part of China, large China, and we will expend every effort in order to bring Taiwan back under the fold. That will feed the heart. Kids have grown up in China hearing that, but it is also a key objective in gaining that strategic imperative. There are two ways in their strategy that they're going back doing it. These are my terms, again, trying to make sense out of it. The first one is a slow burn. That's what we're seeing right now. And I'll talk about this more later on in the presentation. Okay, that is the slow coercion, the slow intimidation to bring Taiwan underneath their fold in order for them to gain access and control of the South China Sea. The second one's a flash fire. Okay, the flash fire is the invasion of Taiwan. But both strategies, okay, focus on the isolation of Taiwan through their expansion throughout the South China Sea, island reclamation, which I have seen. It's a slow burn. I have seen, this was a narrative from 2005. We're building resorts, we're building hotels. I got to have an airfield for those hotels and those resorts. I got to protect my citizens, so I'm going to put up air defense assets. And now I need military barracks in order for me to go ahead and run those assets. It's across multiple administrations, we've seen this encroachment. And if you look at, again, the strategic imperative, why would China want to do that? It's to gain control. My last slide will show that. Border nation intimidation. See where it's at. The power of the purse, the Belt and Road Initiative that China has taken to the globe, basically debt diplomacy. International intimidation through the UN and all trade organizations. They have built an anti-access area denial. And I have a slide up there that will go ahead and explain that a little bit more. Throughout the first island chain, denying us the ability to go ahead and protect and potentially defend Taiwan. And they also have targets on our second island chain in Guam and Palau. And I'll show this up on a map. What's our strategic imperative? How can our elected officials go to the American population and say this is important? I believe is to ensure access to that same place that China wants to control, right? But Taiwan is our national responsibility. We have a Taiwan Relations Act signed in 1979, and I'll show some highlights of that. Okay, it was passed by Congress, signed by a president. We have a responsibility, but I think that responsibility needs to be put in the context of the larger picture, and that is to ensure universal access to South China Sea. There's tons of resources there and fish, and again, I'll go in a little bit later on. We need to manage that slow burn, which is occurring right now, while concurrently deterring the flash fire. We need to be committed to our partners and allies in the region. And this, again, this is me. We are a Pacific nation. When you say that to a lot of people in Alabama or Florida or whatever, it makes sense, but in the head, it's really hard to think about it. So what I like to say is we all live on the same street out there in the Pacific, but we don't live in the cul-de-sac. Okay, the cul-de-sac is the South China Sea. The cul-de-sac is China, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, so on and so forth, Bangladesh. That's the cul-de-sac. And if anybody has ever lived in a cul-de-sac, you know it's a little bit more, it's a closer knit community than living on a street. We need to be in the cul-de-sac as much as we possibly can. And we need to support the Taiwanese military development, helping with the doctrine, training, materials, and weapons. Taiwan Relations Act says that. This right here, the key conclusions, this drives the rest of my presentation. Okay, gain control of the South China Sea, ensure access to the South China Sea. Those are the conflicting strategic imperatives right there. This is what's defined our relationship so far with China. We have the communiques on the left. We were opening it up, Nixon and Kissinger, and everybody's moving forward in 72, and then 79 and 82. That's the foundation. Okay, we acknowledge, and I was talking to Ed, we were having lunch, we were talking about this. The words mean everything, right? We say one China and Taiwan is a part of China. We didn't say PRC and ROC, right? Taiwan is also China, the Republic of China. They got China, the People's Republic of China. But I always found it interesting, we just said China, we didn't label it as PRC. We didn't label it as ROC. Neither should seek to be a power within the region. Well, that's going away by the wayside. And the last one is we're not going to pursue two Chinas or one China, one Taiwan. That's defined our relationship. Bilateral with China, these three. The Taiwan Relations Act is our responsibility. Again, like I said earlier, passed by Congress, signed by a president. I want to bring highlight to the blue. Okay, any use of force against Taiwan is a threat to the security of the region. That's force. But the fourth bullet down there, I think, is even more important when you talk about slow burn, you talk about the flash fire. Maintain the capacity, not the capability, the capacity, the depth of this nation, okay, to resist any use from the People's Republic of China of force or coercion with Taiwan. What do I mean by capacity? Diplomatic, information, military, economic, finance, intelligence, and legal. You can even say the defense industry, that capacity to be able to do those two things. Okay, do something against the PRC if they either coerce or use force in order to bring Taiwan back. And it authorizes the appropriation of funds, not the allocation, but the appropriation of funds necessary to carry out the provisions of this act. When we have these discussions, at least on the Capitol, to me, that's the starting point. That's the law. Okay, from there, then we can have this discussion. What are we doing within our law, and what do we need to do to ensure that we are in compliance with that law? From there, then we can move on. Okay, the next slide here, I'm gonna do a finger walk around the map. So you take what I've said a couple times before, and now I'm gonna try to go ahead and show you how I see the Asia-Pacific place. We have 5 non-NATO mutual defense treaty allies. We have South Korea, Japan, Thailand, the Philippines, and Australia. Now, one would think if we were in a conflict with China, that we could automatically invoke the mutual defense treaties. That's not necessarily the case. Okay, it's not automatic. And normally what happens in all these type of defense treaties is there's consultation at the foreign ministry level or the Secretary of State level to go ahead and make that determination on whether assets from both nations should be committed in order to accomplish a single task. But those decisions are political decisions. And even though we're going to follow each country's constitutional processes, those processes are political in nature, and rightfully so. Let's say Burma attacks Thailand and they want to invoke the MDT. Are we going to go ahead and send our US forces over to Thailand and defend Thailand from Burma or Myanmar? Those are the kind of discussions. The Philippines, China, for the Philippines, China is our largest trading partner. Okay, for them to say, yes, we're going to go to the MDT, that's giving up their largest trading partner. There are a lot of things that go into a decision, whether to go ahead and comply. My point being, we do have these 5 allies out here. I think they would support us. I don't know if we would invoke the MDT for that level of support. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes. We talk about the first and second island chains. Okay, the first island chain goes from the southern part of Japan down the Ryukyus, which Okinawa consists of, on the west side of the Philippines, all the way down through Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, and on up to Vietnam. That's what China wants to have control over. They believe if they have control over the first island chains, they have a free access out to the Pacific for their security and for the dollars in their purse. And then the second island chain, that includes Guam and Palau. If you all remember a couple of years ago, or even last year, China was proposing that they would be able, they proposed to the Oceania Islands nations that they would provide both physical and cyber security for them. And it came that close to those governments agreeing to that. That close. Imagine if they had that control out there. If you ever heard of the 9-dash line? Okay, this is not, and this is, it's not perfect up there. I'm just trying to go ahead and take what I saw on other maps and put it on this map. So it's not exactly geographically correct, but it gives you an idea. The 9-dash line was in the late 50s. Someone in China drew 9 dashes on a map and said, this demonstrates that the South China Sea is China's property. Now, the Philippines took offense to that, and they went to The Hague, the World Court. And despite significant amount of Chinese intimidation of the World Court came down and said, you know what, China, you don't have a leg to stand on. Does not follow within the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea. And with whoever drew this stuff, it's not a foundation document. China said, fine, file that away with everything else that I don't comply or agree with you on. So they believe internally in their head that this 9-dash line, which includes the South China Sea and Taiwan, is theirs. There's another reason why that this whole thing is a strategic imperative. So if you hear 9-dash line, if you hear first and second island chains, at least now you have a visualization, if you hadn't before, of what these look like on the map. 4 of the world's largest economies, and this is just recent, are right here. It's not Hawaii, it's the US, but Hawaii was the closest state that we have over here. 24% of the global economy, GDP, is the United States, followed by China and Japan, and of course, India. Germany's the other one. Okay, that's large. So if there's a flash fire here, all right, that's significant. And you can read for yourself down here how much of the global GDP goes through the busiest seaports. And then this right here, the sea lane. So when you start looking at a map and you're saying, okay, what is the most traveled areas? Because our ships got to travel as well. Those right there, those are the sea lanes, the major sea lanes. What's in red are some of the choke points. And if you look at the Miyako Strait and the Bashi Channel is just north of Luzon in the Philippines, and the Miyako Strait is just north of Taiwan. Those two provide access to the Pacific for China. And of course, the Strait of Malacca. Billions and billions of 20-foot equivalent units, those things that are put on the ship, travel through these choke points. Imagine if we had a war in Taiwan. If we thought ships sitting off the port of Long Beach during the first part of the Ukraine war and all through the COVID was something, we ain't seen it. 45% of the world's oil goes through there and 60% of the maritime trade. Next two slides. First one is going to be, as I talked about before, the slow burn. Okay, slow burn is as I say here, isolation, intimidation, and coercion. Now, if someone doesn't know what hybrid warfare is, this is a definition out of the Center of Excellence in Europe about hybrid warfare. It's an ongoing low-level form of multi-domain coercion. Remember the Taiwan Relations Act, without ever escalating to a shooting war. Russia is very good at this, extremely good. Or it could be a multi-domain, like the information domain or the physical domain, first phase of a move for a kinetic action, the use of force against an island. Coercion and force, Taiwan Relations Act, maintain the capacity to resist. Hybrid warfare uses all these things down here, information ops, cyber ops, proxy forces. In the case of China, their maritime militia is gigantic. Ships larger than this room, and they intimidate. They stand and they intimidate. Exploit protest movements. I'm not going to read every single one of them. Political and diplomatic influence. Okay, they fund think tanks throughout the world. Try to influence how people are looking at the same problem sets in China's behalf, interfering in the process of the political world. Diplomatic intimidation, the tiger diplomats. Okay, they're going to go face to face, nose to nose, shoulder to shoulder through intimidation. That's part of hybrid. It happens all at once at different levels at different times. And it's the slow squeezing to get Taiwan underneath their umbrella. They fortify their islands. The militia used to protect the fisheries. They have sat off the island of Palawan in the Philippines, denying the Philippine fishermen their right, 200 miles. The economic exclusion zone, right? Part of the UN Convention for Law of the Sea. Each nation has that. That's their property. We have the 12-mile territorial waters, but you also have the 200-mile economic exclusion zone. They have denied the Philippines the right to fish in their own waters through this intimidation. The air defense identification zone that was established over the South China Sea by China. It's part of national ownership. Now, the US military does not recognize the ADIZ. That's what we call it, the ADIZ. They do not. So they will not call in or out whenever they enter or exit. Commercial aircraft do. Now, having sat on a military aircraft over the South China Sea, I bring it on. Having sat as a passenger in the commercial airlines, please call in because I don't want a mistake to be happen. Prime example, if you see the world from where you sit. Okay, but the fact is they established that and is being recognized. Part of that hybrid capability, intimidation. They're going to isolate Taiwan on the global stage. They've been doing that and they continue to do that through the United Nations as well as the economic partnerships. To this day, I think there's only 12 or 13 countries that actually recognize Taiwan as a nation. We don't recognize Taiwan as a nation. Separate. And then direct intimidation. You're seeing that through the military. The jets flying in, turning around. The ships turning around. What's the response? How do they respond? Keeping them on edge. Over time, that's exhausting. Over time, you start saying, oh, they're going to do it again, and you don't pay as much attention to it the second, third, fourth, fifth time. Part of that slow burn, ladies and gentlemen. What's our U.S. strategy? Manage and smolder that burn, like that Moody fire out there, right? Got to smolder it, get rid of it. We use the rule of law as best we possibly can in the environment that we have. We use the military and economic means available to us. We use the trade pact and agreements, our military out there doing engagement and information. Just about this balloon stuff, already back and forth with this information. Credibility, that's what we have. I don't think China has that. So if we use information, we have to use it in a credible fashion because people believe us more than they believe the adversary or China in this case. And we have to have presence in the cul-de-sac. Consistent, constant presence. the flash fire, what everyone fears, and rightfully so. Okay. It's easy to talk about how China would do this, right? So they're going to go ahead. They're going to isolate, no doubt. They're going to bomb. I've been down here in Kaohsiung and up in Taipei. There's a fast moving train between the two places right here, taken it many a times. But there's a lot of mountains up here. So they're going to go ahead and do this. Isolate it, A2DT, take these islands, and you can only occupy Taiwan through either flying soldiers in or amphibious assault. That's a huge endeavor, an amphibious assault right here. Okay, but that's something that's in their plans. It's in their white paper. What does Taiwan have to do? They got to withstand the initial onslaught. If you ever heard the porcupine strategy, small team, just like Ukraine, just like the first part of Ukraine, right? You're not going to have big tanks moving out there or anything. So it's all that small stuff, harassing and interdicting, making it miserable. That's what they got to do. They got to hold out. Why? The U.S. National Command Authority needs to make a timely and decisive decision. Now, the Center for Strategic and International Studies did a 2-year study, 24 war games over 2 years, and I'll talk about that in a sec here. Okay, what they said that within a specific 10 to 14 day time frame, if not earlier, we have to, no kidding, agree that we're going to be sitting at the table with them or not. That's how fast this is going to happen. We have to mitigate the A2AT. That's the, I got to figure this out, anti-accessory denial. So, we got Japan, we got the second island chain out here, first island chain over here. You can see all of that capability guarding it, but you can also see these out here, the DF-21Ds and 26. Those are anti-ships. It's going to be a naval war. That we got to go ahead and mitigate their ability to reach out that far, especially when you have carriers operating in the area and cruisers and destroyers and tenders. That's huge right here. I mean, those are like mini walls. So we're going to have to go ahead and mitigate as best we possibly can those capabilities. How do we do that? By the diplomatic efforts to ensure access, basing, and overflight of some of these countries within the cul-de-sac, and to have the requisite authorities and the rules of engagement to be successful. Again, what do I mean by that? When we talk about access, basing, and overflight, if you look at the map over here, you see China, Taiwan is up here. Okay, in the old days, you got Udon Thani up here, we had Utapao down here. Well, Thailand, without invoking the NBT, allow us to use those airfields in order for us to rearm or refuel. Will Laos and Vietnam allow us to fly over their nation? If y'all remember back in Libya, when we bombed Libya, France wouldn't allow us to fly over the country. We had to fly all the way around, right? In our F-111s. So part of our diplomatic effort is to go ahead and see, I need to cut this, because if Japan's the only one to allow us access, that's a one direction movement right there. And that's easy for our adversary to go ahead and mitigate. So you look at the Philippines, we got the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. And we have 4 new added bases to the original agreement that was made under the Biden administration. They gave us 5 bases. Now, that doesn't mean we park people and things there. That means we can use those installations in a crisis. Will the Philippines, the government of the Philippines, allow us to use it in a war against China? I don't know. That's something our diplomatic corps has got to look at. 2 of the new ones are up here in the north, in the northern part of Luzon, right off the Bashi Straits. Important, extremely important. Will they allow us? Will they allow us to store materials? How about if we have an aircraft or a ship that goes down? Can we go into Subic Bay? Well, Vietnam allows us to go into Cam Ranh Bay. I don't know, but that's part of the thing when you look at this environment and you say, what do we need to do to be successful? This is one of the things we need to do to be successful. If we have an aircraft that is shot or a ship that's is about to sink, can they go into the ports? Authorities. Is our National Command Authority going to allow us to go ahead and do mainland strikes on China? Yes, they have to. I mean, all these ships right here are going to go ahead and go over here. That's a big decision. Okay, that's a huge decision. It's easy to say, yeah, we're going to do it. And I don't want somebody who's a happy trigger finger. I want somebody who's going to go ahead and be steady at the helm. Make that decision because it's the right decision to make, 50% chance of being right. All right. That's what we need by authorities, rules of engagement. Rules of engagement on the maritime militia. When are they a combatant? Or can we take them down or not? All very important things, all at the 60,000 foot level. These are the things, the discussions that need to be had with our National Command Authority and then subsequently passed down to our military forces. The CSIS study and all the 24 iterations they ran, the US and its allies came out on top in a war, a flash fire war against Taiwan. But it's going to be a Pyrrhic victory. Taiwan economy and infrastructure will be absolutely destroyed. Absolutely. We get a lot of our computer chips, right, from Taiwan. That's going to be gone. Global economy erupted. You saw that earlier in the map. The shipping lanes, the GDPs, how much shipping goes through. Again, if we thought that the experiences that we had just in the last 2 years was bad, it pales in comparison to something that's going to occur out there. US lost military capabilities. And this is important. From their war gaming, okay, if you want to see numbers, I took the highest and the lowest for a 7-8 week battle. This isn't like Afghanistan. This isn't like Iraq. This is a quick flash fire. That's a lot of aircraft. And even more so, there are bodies and souls in each one of those aircraft on the US. Those are generation 4 and 5 aircraft. That is a significant loss. Look at the ships, 28 to 43 on the US. 2 of those are carriers, capital asset. A US carrier sitting off the coast of a nation tells that nation that the US is invested in whatever situation it is. It's the most visible sign of US presence and power is a carrier in the carrier strike force. 2 of them in this unclassified exercise. 6,000 to 10,000. We're talking 8 weeks. Haven't seen those numbers since World War II. China fleet, of course, is destroyed. The amphibious operation fails. And one of the key tipping points is submarines. Now, when we talk about capacity, we are retiring 2 fast attack submarines a year. We're only building 2 a year. So we're at a straight level. Takes money, takes commitment. Because of all those losses, we may lose influence on the global stage. We may start seeing a Russia or North Korea getting a little bit happier with themselves, or an Iran. It's a significant cost. And CSIS was the one to go ahead and say, in an unclassified, thank goodness, unclassified, because I wouldn't be able to talk about this stuff if they didn't come up with these numbers in an unclassified environment. But right there, that should tell everybody, man, this is huge. So my final thoughts, and I got one more slide after this. We need, okay, it needs to be more than a slogan. We actually need to go ahead and ensure that the capacity that is defined in a law is followed, and we need to commit to this region. Why? And I believe Taiwan and the South China Sea are so they be thought of as one, okay? If the PRC gains control. Now, I'm not saying they're gonna do this. What's threat? Threat is capability plus intent. Okay, if they have the capability, this would be their intent on how to use that capability. To me, that's a threat. They could determine the distribution of all resources there. They can secure those shipping lanes I just showed you, supply chains, logistics hubs, control the regional communications, become the rule maker and legally transform international waters, which it currently is, into international seas or internal seas. I knew it has in the withdrawal of the US military. Even in ASEAN, they came before and they wanted to propose something. That's the Association for Southeast Asian Nations, of which we have an ambassador assigned to ASEAN. They had proposed that any exercises does not include any bilateral, multilateral exercise between those nations does not include US assets. Of course, that was dead in the water before it started, but it gives you an intent, an idea of what China wants to do. We need to go ahead and have constant engagement, be in the cul-de-sac, like I said. We need to have our forward deployed forces, Okay, I can't show them all, but those 4 deployed forces are going to engage those countries that I identified earlier. We want to modernize our alliances, strengthen the partnerships with those. Singapore, I'll tell you what, Singapore is a lightweight fighter battling with the heavyweights, and they're standing their ground. Amazing, amazing city-state. Taiwan, New Zealand, Mongolia. And we want to expand our partnerships to the Indo area, revitalize those Pacific islands, Guam and Palau and all those, the oceanic nations, expand our partnerships with those countries, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and sustain and strengthen those that you see there. That's where we use our forces. That's where our embassy is. That's where our trade pacts are. That's what we need to do. And then we also need to go ahead and be intimately involved like we are right now with that architecture that goes on. US is right down here, right? We're involved in the East Asia Summit, and that's a defense ministers meeting, sorry. ASEAN +3, ASEAN, all these things, those are all the organizations that go on, and we need to be intimately involved in those in order to ensure that we remain in the cul-de-sac. They have a pickup back spot, a baseball game in the cul-de-sac, we need to be part of the team. Basketball, part of the team. They're gonna have a block party, we need to be down there. Okay, we need to be present there. 2024 election cycles, not only here, but Taiwan. The current vice president of Taiwan is the current president of the ruling party in Taiwan. He's going up for election to president next year. He's an isolationist, does not want to go underneath PRC control. Huge, that's huge. Our own election cycle, I don't think I have to tell anybody here how, I don't want to say exciting, how interesting that will be. That to me is a gap, okay, that could be exploited by China. We're going to be so enthralled internally that they may see that as an opportunity. I don't know, but it is something that we need to go ahead and pay attention to. Now, if there's anything that I have said here that could be easily forgotten, I asked you, don't forget this last slide. This is my going away slide. If there's anything I got to present to you today, it's that. And even though the first part of that takes money, takes effort, takes time, takes commitment, not only by our population, but by our national elements or our elements of national power, it's this. Okay, I'd prefer to go ahead and spend the money as an insurance policy up front, smolder that slow burn, deter that flash fire, instead of seeing the potential results that I showed earlier in this presentation about the loss of lives and capabilities and assets and economy, et cetera. I'll leave that up there so we can talk. So I think I left this time enough for questions. Sir.
You mentioned the porcupine strategy. Taiwan is criticized for not really being porcupine like for them. Military expenditure is really low. Military service by few lackadaisical. Do you see any change there coming?
You know, sir, great question. Yes, so the question was that Taiwan has not spent the money it needs to spend to ensure its defense. Taiwan's military is not, dare I say, like the Ukraine's effort against Russia, that they're not as strong, and that they may not be the military to execute this strategy, this porcupine strategy, is a small team strategy. All fair, sir, and all correct. Almost 90%. I've been over there for a couple exercises, and I think that exists in any military. I think that's why I said what we need to do as a military and as a nation to commit more. We've only gone there as observers. We don't go there as trainers. I mean, there's a fine line, you know, between what we can and cannot do. And I think if we increase our training teams and try to bring them up to a level of self-sufficiency, hold out for 2 weeks. That's what I'm asking you to do. If we have time of decision, I think it would be a better outcome. But that's a concern. It's a fair question. My answer may not have answered it all, but I think there is room that we can contribute to their effort to get better at defending their nation. Sir.
And Australia bring fresh military to assist us.
Yes, sir. Japan is, they're always stuck on their constitution, like we all are. They don't like to amend that constitution. We helped write that constitution post-World War II after we saw what Japan did throughout the area, which they have lived a majority of their life with a reduced military presence and outside of their only defense. My 20 years over there, we have been spending pulling them out, become participants in exercises like Cobra Gold, the Balikatan. These names don't mean anything to you, just to let you know that there are a number of exercises that are multinational and bilateral in nature. They are now coming out. They are building a relationship. They are having more assets, building more things. I think they understand and appreciate their current role or their role in assisting the U.S. Now, the CSIS study had Japan supporting us, supporting on bases, supporting the people, ships, etc. And they are getting better. Australia has always been a great partner, but like all nations, they also have to deal with their political turmoils and their relationship with China. 2 years ago, they said something, did a number of things with the with the trade, and that they are at, I guess, a more lengthy relationship, length and arm length with China than they were previously. Could we count on them in a conflict? Japan for sure. Australia, I'd give it 90%. And they are increasing. Now, Australia's been a fantastic partner in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they have already demonstrated their worth to ours. I hope that answered the question, sir. Sir.
You go into a non-Taiwan question.
Yes, sir.
How and when does Putin war in Ukraine end?
That's it. Boy, I'll tell you, sir, if I had that answer, I wouldn't be standing here right now. Who was it? Sir, I'm not into predictions. That's hard. I would say that the success of Ukraine still relies on whether the Western nations, NATO and the US, and all the coalition that this current administration has built is going to continue to withstand what's occurring over there. I think if we start pulling back, if we don't give what we have promised, moral support, physical support, intelligence support, military arms support, they're just going to fall. It is currently a stalemate. I think the answer will be better defined after this perceived Russia second offensive occurs, which is currently it's starting right now. And we'll see how far they get. If they're not successful, I think it'll end in Ukraine's favor. If they are successful, I think it'll be a continuous stalemate between NATO and Russia. But my guess is as good as anyone on that, sir. Sir.
Thank you. You're a player. Enjoy it. Because a couple of us at this table work as planners under Billy's father-in-law. And we spent our entire opinion with full cap.
Yes, sir.
Planning question. Did you look at planners, incremental fires where China, like Russia, takes a little bit at a time, took Crimea, not much happened. Things began taking islands. What did I just take one of the islands? Let's do that. Easy to do. Where can we go from there?
You're talking these ones right here. Great question, sir. I mean, to Taiwan, they would have considered themselves invaded. Will our National Command Authority think the same? You know, will we go ahead and place as much emphasis on those 3 islands as we would on the Big Island? That's a great question. To me, the dice can roll either way. Depends on which way the wind's blowing. You know, it's, again, it's not a definitive answer, but it's the best I can give on that one. That's a great question. It's part of the National Command Authority.
Do you see any correlation in the slow burn theory that you have set out? Do you see any correlation between this balloon aggression by China as a test of our will as far as a Taiwanese outrage? And if that's so, what about our Asian Pacific partners that you identify? Are they equally outraged, or are they complaining? What linked the balloon of aggression to your situation on the slow burn?
Okay, sir. The answer to your question is yes. I do believe. And I'll tell you what, this is, and I've been thinking about this all week. China did us a big favor. You know, by having that thing float over here, by us having a, you know, being identified, it is demonstrated, I believe, to the American population that the problem ain't over there. It's over here as well. And if we just think it's a regional issue, I think that demonstrated that it's not. It is a global issue. And it is part of the intimidation. It is part of seeing how we respond. You know, are we steady on the helm, right? That's what I want. You know, I think we've all heard the pundits, all heard the politicians, all heard a number of people who said they would do a number of things. I would have shot that thing immediately when I saw it. Okay, that's fine. That's one course of action. I prefer the course of action that was chosen. Okay, everything I've read and understand. Okay, there were two things. You blind it, you drop it, you do both. Well, we did both. We blinded it, okay, didn't allow it to collect, or we took those measures to say it couldn't collect, couldn't communicate. So it was basically a hunk of metal floating underneath a helium balloon. Did it traverse our nation? Yes, it did. Yes, it did. But we don't have to shoot it. I mean, the finger doesn't have to be the first thing we do. There are all those elements of national power. We can address it otherwise. Then we dropped it. And we could have dropped it on the land. Best way I can say this, if anybody's helocasted, okay, helocasting 25 feet above water hurts a lot less than helocasting above ground. Okay, so when you got something dropping from 60,000 feet, I'm also a special forces free fall parachutist. Okay, and you offset things in order to hit where you get. So we don't know what the winds aloft were. I don't know how far this thing was going to flow. I don't know what the debris field was going to be. I mean, all those questions need to be asked, and I believe they were. And I believe the decision that was made was the right decision. Why? Because it was blinded across. We dropped it. Now we got all that information we can get and in order for us to address maybe future incursions like that. That was the smart decision. Could have scattered it all over here to there in the mountains of Alaska and never recovered anything. We had a better chance of doing that. What is the feeling outside? And I'll just because last time you used that thing to pull me off the stage. Around the nation, gets to the cul-de-sac, sir. Okay, when they look across the South China Sea, who do they see? They see China. When they look to the left, who do they see? China. When they look across the border, who do they see? China. They live in the cul-de-sac. They know that they live in the cul-de-sac. Largest trading partner in the Philippines is China. However, that being said, they appreciate the U.S. They appreciate our engagement. They want to work with us all the time, at least on the military side of the house. They know full and well that if the world was going to tip, they wanted to tip in our favor. But they also have to be careful because when they walk across the street, they're going to see China. When they do Halloween, they got to go to their house.
No. We're at time. Sorry, buddy. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, gosh.